Hello, welcome to Math for All, where we make math creative, curious, inclusive for everyone. I'm Molly Vokey.
And I'm Heidi Subnani. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're really excited to speak with our friend Jenna. And we always have amazing conversations with her. If you are watching, we would love it if you could follow along at Math for All show. And it's that same, but with blue sky after it now. We probably should change that.
Oh, yeah, need to change that.
And Math for All on YouTube or our Facebook page or on our website. You can find us at any of those places, and we would love to chat with you about what you are doing in your corner of the math world.
Yes, and if you're interested, please go to Didex and take a look at our book called Math Activators, which is in my school bag, so I can't show it to you. But today we're going to be talking to our friend. I'm going to put her name up first. I'm sorry. We're off kilter today, obviously. The
Happy
first
New Year
in 2025. We're going to be talking to our friend Jenna Laib today, and we're going to be talking to her about how formative assessment informs our understanding of what a student knows and how do we act on that, which is what I was doing in school today. So I hope my teachers are watching. But let's hear about Jenna. Jenna is employed as a K-8 math specialist in Brookline, Massachusetts. She's near us. How fun. Previously, she taught 4th through 6th grade. She does educational consulting for districts in the greater Boston area and also has worked for organizations like Illustrative Mathematics and the Museum of Science in Boston. Jenna was the 2016 recipient of the Harry S. Leviton, I hope I said that right, Prize for Educational Leadership from Brandeis University, a 2017 Margaret Metzger Fellow, and a 2023 Desmos Fellow. She has also had the pleasure of speaking at conferences across the U.S. and Canada, which is how we know her. So, no further ado, let's bring her in. Hello.
It's so nice to see you. Sorry as I adjust.
That's okay. We get it. We get it. We're happy to see you here.
I'm so happy to see you. I feel like I don't get to see you enough between conferences.
I
know. That is the thing about conferences is that, and you live closer to us probably than most people we see at conferences.
Yeah.
And so it seems silly that we never see, but we must do another get together. So.
Yes. It's always fun. So if for some reason someone doesn't know you, this is where we start with what is your math story?
What is my math story? I grew up really enjoying math. And I feel like it was a big part of my identity. But then as I got older, I fell in love with lots of other things. And I also trying to think of what to include and what not to include. I forgot that you were going to ask this question. We're going to skip ahead to the fact that
whatever you want.
Yeah. I know. How much trauma dumping do we want to do at the very beginning of this? No.
Sorry, mine is super traumatic. People are used to it.
It's actually true. I wish we should probably go back and see how many stories are positive, starting, positive, and how many start negative. Probably be a pretty decent statistic.
Beautifully positive. I loved doing like non-curricular math. I just found math really interesting. I liked mathematizing the world. And then I actually got really, really sick when I was a teenager and I missed 2 years of school. Oh. And so, but I had this identity that like, I'm the smart kid. I'm not going to be held back. So even though I didn't get enough days to get credit for those years, I did well on my final exams. They let me keep going, which like was, I thought was great for me at the time. Yeah. In hindsight, okay, I do well enough to do well in a final exam. The final exam does not represent the rigor of the entire course. So I did just fine, and I kept going just fine. And like, even though I missed Algebra 1 and Geometry, I went to Algebra 2.
Oh, just
those are not pivotal at all.
Algebra 2, I felt like
Like
kind
that.
of hints on that algebra 1. I did fine. I still was getting like A's, A minuses. I was doing okay, but I knew that my understanding was really fragile. And I knew that I was going to have to work harder for it. And that really, like, I felt like it was an attack on my identity, and I didn't have that growth mindset. It was very much like this always used to come easy to me, and now it's not coming easy, and it's not quite as much fun. And so I still liked math, but I majored in American history. So but I did have lots of passion. So it didn't feel like I was like giving something up. It just felt like, I have other things that I'm more into right now. I do have like a very distinct memory of being really embarrassed. I didn't know what FOIL meant in algebra 2. The kids keep saying FOIL, and I'm like, I don't know what this is, and I don't want to ask. Like, I just refuse to ask. And then eventually one day I went to the teacher. He was the nicest. His name's Carl. Love Carl, brilliant man. And I was like, Carl, I don't know what this means. He's like, what do you mean you don't know what it means? Like, you get all the problems. And I'm like, I don't know what it is though. And he pointed out that like I was using the distributive property, and like other people were relying on a gimmick that wasn't always going to work, but that I actually understood it. And so it was working out okay for me. But I felt so ashamed.
Mhm.
But isn't that interesting though? Like you had more conceptual knowledge and yet still you were like, oh no, I don't know that acronym. How will I ever survive?
Right? I mean, things did fall apart later. I think calculus was like, it wasn't my my high school also did calculus as a double block for 10 weeks. And we already had block schedules. Okay, so a regular block was 90 minutes, so a double block was 3 hours.
See my face and my
So it was 3 hours of calculus a day plus 3 hours of homework a day.
Imagine the PD that you would have to do in order to teach math in high school for 3 hours.
which I mean,
Um,
honestly, even if it was like an amazing high school, they probably didn't have, and they were just like
Oh
teaching
my
3
they had
lessons in
switched
3
it since I graduated, weirdly. Um, they've decided that doing an AP class in 10 weeks is like not their greatest idea.
Yeah.
I think it was easy for scheduling. I don't really know why they did that. Anyway, it was miserable. And I don't think it went great as I recall.
And imagine why.
And then I was like, I guess I'm done. But I still really liked math. So even though I majored in American history and I loved anthropology, like I loved a lot of different things. And loved literature, started teaching 4th grade and really fell back in love with math as I was working with young kids
Mhm.
and getting to really think about how I articulate it and how I explain things and how I build the understanding, getting to listen to kids talk about it was so exciting. And very quickly, the math coordinator for the district, who was the coordinator for like math and science and PE and health, it was like one of those. But he was a math guy. He came to is my first year teaching. I was 22 years old. He came into my classroom and he was like, "You understand what you're doing." I don't think I was necessarily the most brilliant teacher of all time at, at 22, but he saw something in me where he was like, "You understand it," and he put me on all of these committees. So as a first year teacher, I was put on all of these committees and PD development things for the whole district. And like by my 3rd year, I was giving PD, and then went to grad school. I didn't actually want to specialize because I didn't want to pigeonhole myself. Like, I can't be contained. Um,
We agree you cannot.
I contain multitudes, and thus I can't specialize, but also that would have been really good for a job. But I just found myself like wanting to do math. I wanted to do a lot of math. And so I studied under like Suzanne Chapin at BU, and I did my thesis was like looking at actually math specialists in the district where I now work, and analyzing kind of how they make their priorities, and just really fell in love with teaching math all over again. And so it was during the recession, needed a job, thought I was going to go back to the elementary classroom, but went into math and stayed. And I love it. There's things I miss about being a classroom teacher, but I think I love getting to work with every grade level. I have so much trouble giving them up.
Yeah, yeah. I've in the last week I've worked with 3 different math specialists, and they have all said that they like being able to go from grade level to grade level to see what's going on and see what the threads are that sew them together. And I 100% agree that few people get to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I take it for granted. And I get to see all my colleagues doing these brilliant things. I just feel like my position is such a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
So it's beautiful. So I like to stay. I did go back to the classroom for a year to do middle school math, and that was also super fun.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's talk about formative assessment, because this is what I was doing in school today, and I want to hear more from you, even though I did get to hear your last talk wherever we were last.
Oh yeah, with Louisa.
The call was a complete blur of conferences, but how does this formative assessment inform our understanding of what a student knows, and how do we act on that?
Yes. So I know I've been like, this question's been percolating in my mind. Also, the fact that intro, what is my math story, took so long, my apologies. This is why I don't want to ever have to do interviews again. Not interviews like this, interviews for jobs again. Because I like take 10 minutes, answer the first question. They're like, just so
no. Some people take way longer than this. Some people's math story are way older than you, so they have a longer story.
It could have been expanded, but I feel good about I know. I love it. Right. So as I was thinking about like formative assessment, whenever I say the word assessment, it kind of feels like, Charlie Brown teacher. Like people will look at me just like, like it's sad, like womp womp. But like, why do I love assessment so much? I think it's because I love kid thinking so much. Like it's not like I love Scantron sheets. I'm not passionate about spreadsheets per se, although I do actually really like a spreadsheet. Like people know that. But that one struggle with spreadsheets is like, how do you, like, what data do you want to, like, how do you want to create the visualization of your data? Like you're the author of how you want to visualize and how you want to capture it. But also just like I do lots of like looking at student work with teachers because I love student thinking. Like I just think it's so, there's always something that comes up in class that surprises me. And like as I was thinking about this question the other day, and today I had to go in and teach for a fourth grade teacher who wasn't going to be there. And she's like, oh, could you launch the unit on addition? So we're going to do the standard algorithm. That is the standard in fourth grade. They've now spent years developing their sense of additive understandings. And like, we're finally going to do like what some kids say called, oh, we're going to do long addition. I'm like, that's weird because it actually it's a shorter record on the page than all of the
like long division, long addition.
They're just like, that's the standard. Yeah. So it's like, okay, we're finally going to do that. But I'm like, so there's always some kids that already know it, but I don't want you to give some long assessment that like makes other kids cry.
Yeah.
Like the goal of assessment is never to make kids feel punished for not knowing something.
I'll say that again. That right there. I'm gonna come back to that. I'm just gonna put that on the floor.
I see it all the time. I used to do this session about pre-assessments because I always felt so triggered when people would give the assessment that like, I always felt like a gotcha when they would give this long assessment that was actually the end of unit assessment, but they give it before the unit. And then you have some kids that already know everything. Like, okay, now what are you going to do with them? Like, that's great. That's nice to know, I guess. But, and then there's other kids that actually, like they just need a little tiny bit and then they're going to have like the same level of understanding, but they don't know it yet. And like, and there's just lots of kids where it's like, you look and you're like, oh, they don't know it. What do you do with that? That's not helpful. Like, how are you going to build off that understanding when all you see is that deficit? So I hate those. And so instead gave something that we knew kids would have an access. And it was just as simple as like, it was an addition question. Simple actually doesn't really capture it very well because for a third or fourth grader, it's not simple. And there's lots and lots of thinking that goes into it. Yes, but I was just like, just do something that's like technically a third grade standard and like, just, they can enter it any way they want. And we just want to see their thinking. We just want to see what they're going to do. And she handed me all these little scraps of paper. And there was a couple kids that did things I wouldn't ever have anticipated. Like, I can go through and say, like, I think I'm going to see kids like doing partial sums and decomposing based on place value. There's definitely going to be some kids using the US standard algorithm. There's going to be some kids that are like, I'll come up with like 4 or 5 different things. And it's not that I'd never seen what these kids did. Maybe I've never seen 100% what they did. But yeah, there's always something surprising. Even today in the class, I called on a kid and he was like, "Oh, well, first I like to swap around all the digits." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? What?" But you can't in the middle of it be like, "I'm sorry, sir, like shut it down, didn't mean to call on you." It was really interesting because he was like, "I really like for the big digits to be on the top." And so he knew that it didn't matter if the 100 or the 200 was in a specific number because you're just going to add the hundreds together. So he like rearranged things. So all of the large, like, and it was just a compulsive thing. Like the large digits don't need to be on the
Right, but like you have to have some
They had
understanding
to
and place
know,
value to be able to
right?
do that with success.
It was, I've never seen a kid be like, I just decided that the numbers don't matter, it's the place value that matters. And so I did that. I'm like, what?
Now I want to know. So this is the thing about so if you're not following Jen on social and on blog and all this, you should be doing that because these kind of things are things that you bring up fairly regularly. So like then, like this kind of formative assessment not only gives us a window into what the kid is doing, but it can prompt teacher thinking or our thinking as well, right? Like, so now I want to know if this child would want to do that if it was subtraction or if he had an understanding that you can't necessarily do that in subtraction. Sometimes you can, like depending on
Right. It does
later on, but now I wonder.
No,
Right?
so now
Yeah.
I'm literally doing a math problem right now and trying to make it so that I can understand
I know what
exactly.
he was doing. I'm going to
want
see
you
if
to
we
see
can.
it. So I'm doing 342
Mhm.
plus 516.
Okay. I know. I'm going to just share. Can I share like a blank thing and we can do it?
Oh, please.
See if
Yes,
that'll work.
that would be
Google
amazing.
Slides. Oh,
If
is
you
this going to
do,
happen? Hold on. I need to like name it in my. Let's see. What are we going to name it? The math for all.
name it.
25.
We're so famous now.
I know.
So it would be 5,
Well, you know,
6,
I'm a long form girl. That's why I blog instead of.
I know you.
All good.
My blogs are like 7 pages long, and I'm just like, here you go, unedited.
Yes, I'm with you on the unedited thing.
I mean, I love editing writing. I've worked as a professional editor. I love it, and also when I blog, I'm like, I don't have time to edit this. I'll never blog again.
Right.
All right.
All right. Oh, here it is. Okay, so that
Yeah.
there we go. Can we actually draw on this though?
Are you drawing on it?
It doesn't seem like I can draw. Remove. It looks like I could draw if I put it in earlier. This is a different kid that I wanted to show you.
Oh.
This is the kid where I'm like, what? I would never expected this. Actually, both of these kids, this class is so fascinating. There's 9 kids in this class that are in the language-based learning disability program. So they actually are not districted to my school. They get bused in from other neighborhoods in the town. And they're there specifically for this structured literacy program, and they're dyslexic. And but usually it's like really impacting them if they're going to get bused in from other places. I love working with this cohort so much. They're just so fascinating. And both of the kids happen to be in that cohort. Now, they don't all have math disabilities as well, but most of them do have a math goal on their IEP. So this kid has a math goal on his IEP. Brilliant thinking. I was so excited to see this.
I'm
and I don't
trying
know.
to even figure it out.
The teacher handed me and she's like, he got it wrong, but he was close. Then I was like, let's figure out what this kid did. And I don't think it's just that I'm like, oh, it's so brilliant because he has the math IEP. Like, I think it's just genius thinking that unfortunately is not very efficient and thus will result in him getting wrong answers. But there's a lot we can work with here. So he started with the 79.
Okay, so the original was
179 plus 283.
okay.
And I chose this for our formative assessment because I was like, it will involve regrouping twice,
Mhm.
like it'll give us a little bit more information. Or not regrouping twice, depending on what strategy the kids do. But
Right.
so I think he was like, he wanted to make this not a 9. Like dealing with 9 plus 3, he was like,
Yeah.
no 9s. He really
Okay.
wanted it to be, instead of 79, he wanted it to be 80,
80.
which means he
Okay.
would need one more to add
Oh,
to
so
the 9 to get to
that's
the
what
10.
the 1 plus 9 is 10 up there.
Yes.
Got it.
So did he take
So then he took it from the 83.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Okay, so then that
And he
becomes
made it an 82.
2.
Because then 80 and 82 is very easy to add.
Yeah.
And then he did 162. And then he was like, okay, I have the 100 and the 200. But here's where he got into his head.
Okay.
He was like 100 plus 200. He's like, oh, but it's actually a 200 because look, there's a 100 in the 162. So he did it as 200 plus 200.
Oh.
Which is great, except for
Yeah.
then all you need to do is add the 62 back.
Right.
But instead, he added the 162 and the 10.
Yeah.
And you can see him even thinking about the 60 and the 10 here.
Mm-hmm.
He just added too much back. But like,
Yeah.
there's like, first of all, the compensation to be like, I'd rather not deal with that 9.
Right.
Yeah.
And then make it from an 80, like 79 to 80, and then 83 to 82. And then like to keep track of this all is so
I know.
much.
I was going to say, like, when you see kids specifically, but even adults doing compensation, it's, I don't hardly ever see them taking from within the problem. Usually they're taking away or adding on and then doing the opposite of that at the end instead of taking it within the problem so that you don't have to do anything at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I know. We actually had another girl do, I don't know if this is going to work because I'm just like putting it in there now into this empty Google Doc. No. Now it's going to make me do it over again. There was one other kid who did a compensation strategy that, let's see, present.
Well, and I love, like, in that case, like that child is using,
Won't do it.
like, their understanding of doubling is like, is it that you didn't want to deal with the 9, or that you saw that it would be 82 and 80 and 80, and so you know that doubles fact is going to be 160 plus 2. Like, there's so many different things that could be built on in that, and some of it just feels like the way that he organized his information was the problem versus a lack of understanding.
Yeah. No, and today he did phenomenally. So I was really excited for him. I'm just adding 2 more things to the Google slide just in case we want them later.
So I just was playing around with your
with the other kid?
The first example that you were talking about. So I did 342 on top and 516 on the bottom, which comes out to, I didn't do any regrouping. So it comes out to 858. So I changed it to 546 to 312.
And it works.
Of course, it still comes out to 585. I'm sorry, 858. But now this is making me wonder, and I think if I had to regroup, it still would be the same because the columns are just staying the same.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And I was like, I don't think anyone explicitly ever taught him that. He was just like, I noticed. He's also severely dyslexic. So I was like, that's amazing.
Well, and now I'm wondering, is that going to work with negative numbers?
There we go. Okay. Now this is working.
Yeah.
How do I get it? Now stop sharing.
Oh, I can stop sharing. You don't want to share it?
Oh, well, we can go back to sharing it. Oh, so here, this is the other girl. So she had made this 180 and then 280. But then she knew that she had to add back a 3, but take away a 1. So that's really compensating.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, lovely. I
Yeah.
don't know why you chose this as your strategy, and I love it.
Right.
So with this lesson, we looked at all of them. There were like 11 kids out of 25. I think they have a class of 25. It's a big class. Had already known the traditional algorithm, the US standard
Mhm.
algorithm. We had to talk about how, like, especially because there was like a girl from Japan there. Like, this is not the only country that uses the US standard algorithm.
Right.
In fact, the US standard algorithm wasn't invented in the US. Like, we just call it that because we want to acknowledge that there are other algorithms that are all over the world, including in the US. But
Mhm.
so lots of kids already knew it. A bunch of kids were doing more like partial sums based on place value. We had a couple other little things like the compensation stuff. And so I ended up teaching the lesson. We used investigations. So we used a worked example. We looked at the worked example. We analyzed, like, what are you noticing about it? Like, why is this here? Like, we had lots of conversation, and then decided that instead of doing some of the practice pages, I would give them an open middle problem. Uh,
Mhm.
and that was because so many kids already seem to have a really solid grasp on the procedure of the US standard algorithm for addition. And that doing a couple problems on a page is like not super, it's going to take them 2 seconds, first of all. It's, and then we'll have other kids who it's brand new to them.
Mhm.
And like at no fault of their own, this is when it's introduced in the curriculum. Of course, it's brand
Right.
new to them. And so trying to figure out, like, we want something that's going to, like, instead of always giving like, well, you guys already know this, so you get to do the fun thing, and like everyone else, you have to go do a practice page. Or so decided to do the open middle problem, which everyone could work on. And some kids might finish earlier, or like even if kids didn't necessarily pick up on patterns that were going to get them closer to the target, they were at least getting some of the practice in, and we could see how they were doing with the procedure. Teaching procedures is not always my favorite thing in math to teach, but sometimes I really like it. So it was fun.
Hmm.
And so, is it this one? See if it will load now. Removed from the studio. Okay, so let's see if it works now. How do I get it to share the screen again?
I do.
I taught on Zoom for a year, but this is different. Okay, so
It is.
here is one of the girls. This girl is also, I think she has a math goal on her IEP. And she was doing great. She's relatively new to the algorithm. And the first one she did, so the goal here was to get a sum as close to 10,000 as possible, doing two 4-digit numbers. You
Mhm.
can only use the digits 1 through 9 once each, at most once each. And there'll be one digit you don't use. So she first just tried to maximize the value. So you can see
Mhm.
she did like 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. And then she was able to successfully do the traditional algorithm, or the standard algorithm, and was like, well, that's way too big. That didn't work out. And then she's like, I'll mix it up. 9, 8, 7, like now they're all over the place. And she was like, oh, interesting, closer.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And then,
I love open middle for that reason. I feel like it's great for a lot of grades, but I feel like third, fourth, fifth, it's really powerful for. But go on,
yeah,
continue. Love
no, that it, and then well, I had been like, I made you like 10 attempts, like one on like on each side. You have so many attempts because, like, it's going to take multiple attempts. And then
Yep.
one kid came up to me 30 seconds in and he went, I got exactly 10,000 on attempt 1. Is that okay? And I'm like, yeah, that's fine.
No, sorry. Go back and try to
That's
get
okay.
it on the third try.
That's great, Milo. I was like, let me get you something. So he went, I just go on brilliant.org. I'm like, yeah, sure. That's great too.
Mhm.
It's like, well, can you explain to me how you got it exactly? And he was like, yes. And he articulated beautifully. I'm like, solid. I can get it. And I can get excited. I'm not like, some teachers get annoyed when that happens. I'm like, I'm so happy for you. And
Yeah.
also, I don't have time to get something else for you right now. I'm really sorry. Like, you can go do all 10 from Beast Academy, or you can go on a website.
Yeah.
Um, so with this girl, she actually kept going. She went all the way to attempt 5. And she kept like making little adjustments, and she was starting to notice patterns as she went.
Mhm.
And then here she is, she finally got exactly 10,000. And also look, she's doing the traditional algorithm.
Yeah.
Like the standard algorithm happening
Which
over
one
and over.
you're doing?
This one was another. I only chose kids from the program, I guess. This kid also has a math goal in his IEP. He did great. So he originally he was writing down his numbers, and he was like 1-9 because he was going to make pairs that sum to 10.
Mm.
And then he
I
was
mean,
like,
but
wait,
how awesome is that from the
Mhm.
get-go, right?
right? That he was like, and then he got this. He actually, as I was looking at this, I'm like, wait, he did not actually do like the notations for the standard algorithms. I don't actually
Mhm.
know if that's what he was doing, but he explained it enough that like he knows what he's doing. It's fine.
Mhm.
So he was like 1946, and he went, wait, that's already way over 10,000 because this is
Yeah.
10,000. So like the 4 and the 6.
Yeah.
I don't know if can you see my mouse when I'm doing this, or am I just like
No, but
I'm thinking I'm gesturing and you're not getting to see my gestures. That's too bad.
That's all right. We're up.
Okay, so then he attempt number 2. He was like, okay, I'm going to mix it up, 2 and 6 and 1. He's like, wait, this is not going to get close at all
yeah.
because the thousands digits matter the most. And then he tried again, but he was like, we're going to do pairs of 9 now.
Yeah.
So he did the pairs of 9, and he was like, wait, that is all 9s now.
But right, that's the beauty of this, right? Is that the trial and error teaches you so much about place value, especially if you're gonna have to regroup.
Mhm.
That's where everybody struggles.
Yeah.
So awesome.
And then
I
he
love-
knew that just to do one more, he's like, so I need that one, I need one more, which means instead of a 9 in the ones place, I need a 10. So he's
Mhm.
like, okay, so I got to start there. But then he was like, actually, when I asked him, I recorded because he actually struggles a lot with writing. And his written expression just doesn't come easy to him. But I was like, explain to me like how you came up with this. Like, what was your process? And he went, you want the 5 first, since you can't like he basically I can't even read what I wrote there. Since you don't have another 5 or something. But he was like, if you use the 5 first, you can't do a 5 and a 5 to make the 10. So like you know that has to be a pair of 9.
Mhm.
And he was like, so because you can't do the 5 and 5 to make the 10, you know it's gonna be 5 and a 4, and you don't want to use the 4 somewhere else. So like it's like you have to start that way.
I love that. And I love the like different attempts that you did, because I feel like that's sometimes what gets lost for me in open middle, because often kids are doing it on individual whiteboards, and then I can't see
Same.
their thinking over time.
No, and they want to erase it. They want to get rid of it.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, I need to actually see that. So I love
Right.
Yeah, and usually I think Robert has one where it was like, what did you learn
Yeah.
from this one?
Yeah, he does. His is it doesn't look like this. It kind of is more linear going down instead of across, but I do like that piece of it. Like, what did you learn from this one? Even if you're not writing it down, but to be able to share it with a partner or to share it with your teacher, whatever. I really like this. I think there's a big, like, the idea of doing the attempts in order and being able to see what your previous attempt was is doing two things, right? One, it's saying like, you made a mistake and yay, you made that mistake so that you can move on and do something even more brilliant. But then two, it's allowing you to track your work so that you can move on.
Right.
I just feel like it's just awesome. I love it.
Yeah, so this, and also one of the reasons I didn't use I literally made this in like the 30 seconds before class. I was like, oh, I need a recording sheet. I can't just like have it on the slide that says like, now do this problem on your whiteboards, because then they'll just erase everything. They're just going to erase it, and then I'll never see all their practice. And the whole point is the practice of the standard algorithm. Although, like, I don't actually think he was using the standard algorithm with that. I do think I saw him do a different thing, and I know he can do it, so I'm not concerned. But he'll also get more opportunities. This is one day.
Yeah,
it's fine. But that, as I was thinking about like formative assessment in general, that like there's lots of different things that we do. I love doing interviews, so I'd like I've done a bunch of interviews this week with kids where I'll do clinical interviews. I used one from New Zealand called the Gloss, and then I used one of the Marilyn Burns Listen to Learn's protocols was a class. And I love getting to hear kids talk about it and figure out what to use. I love just getting like little exit tickets where it's like, this is just one problem, and then the teacher and I get to look at it. But sometimes the teacher can get overwhelmed. It's like when we looked at all the addition ones, she handed me those on Tuesday. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. And she's like, yeah, this happens sometimes. It's so cool. But like, now what do we do?
Exactly that.
Yeah, and like,
Exactly.
how do we build off the kid? Like the two kids that were doing compensation strategies, like those don't really build naturally into the
Mhm.
US standard algorithm. They really don't.
Mhm.
The kids that are doing place value based strategies, you can easily make that transition and bridge. Like, all right, so Elvira was like using this great partial sum strategy, and like, what do you notice about Elvira's strategy compared with this one? And where do you see the same numbers hidden inside? And like, that works, but for the
Yeah.
compensation strategy, it doesn't connect very well.
Yeah.
How do we build?
Yeah. What's
Right.
what's the next right thing for that kid, even though their compensation strategies like
Solid.
work amazing for like mental math or like doing partial bits of things that you may not see on paper. If the goal is the US standard algorithm, then
Mm-hmm.
is that the best strategy, and like should we be introducing them to others? And I think that's always the thing I struggle with. Like, at what point am I introducing you to another strategy that might be more efficient to get you to the standard that I'm trying to get you to, versus building on the mathematical thinking that you already have? And like sometimes it's like sometimes we can do both, and it's that works out. But other times it feels like we have to make a choice about which one we're doing.
Yeah, and I pulled aside one of the girls, the one who had done the second one. I was like, hey, I noticed that your strategy has this word compensation. It's so cool. And also like one thing that's like about math is that you want to be what's called fluent, but that doesn't just mean you use the same procedure over and over again. Is that you choose your procedures based on the situation and based on the numbers. And I'm wondering if you chose this strategy because of the nines. If like that was something where you were like, oh, I wanted just to adjust a little tiny bit because of the nine. And she was like, yeah, the nine. And I was like, okay, well, you don't always have the nines. And
Yeah.
sometimes the compensation won't be quite as elegant. So here's another one. And she was like, oh, I get it. It's fine. So it was like more for her about affirming. It's not always that simple. It wasn't as simple for the first example I showed you where the kid had actually gotten it wrong. And it was like, I think this strategy, like, I loved what you did. It was so brilliant. And also, it seems like it's a lot to keep track of. And like, this will be less to keep track of. So let's try that. And it's like it's a little sad there, but also that is true. It is true that we
Yeah.
want him to have things he can keep track of. And I think if he only uses strategies like that, he will have trouble to keep track of. But there are times when that is the perfect thing to go to.
Right. And like that one, you can pull some of the pieces out of there and say, you can use this strategy, just not all of it.
Right. Or like I could see it really coming back when we do like some decimal addition of like, oh yeah, you do want to compensate a little bit to get to that whole number.
Yeah.
But that he didn't seem deflated today, which was good. He's sweet.
Well, I was working today with teachers, middle school teachers, and we were looking at some student work, and the teacher came in, was a 5th grade teacher, and they were doing multi-digit multiplication, and the teacher came in and he said, I'm realizing that they know how to do the process, but they don't know how to multiply.
Yep.
And there were, like, he brought 4 pieces of work, and when we looked at all of them, there were mistakes with multiplication within the problem, but the whole procedure was done correctly, but there were mistakes here or there with the multiplication, with the
Like
adding.
with the fact fluency.
Yeah.
I saw that. I met with the 5th grade team after they did their volume unit, and we all had all the student work out, and we're looking at all of the examples. And what we discover is like kids had slightly different strategies. They were thinking about the multiplicative parts in different ways. but they were getting it. Like their conceptual understanding of volume was phenomenal. We're like,
Mhm.
yes, like look at this. And we have to submit some of the data to the district. We're like, all right, everyone met benchmark. We're like, oh, but the kids who got partially meeting, who like were a little tiny bit off, it was all, they thought that like 6 times 5 was 36.
Mhm.
And so it's all like those little tiny errors, or like they'll get hung up on the fact if they don't know, if they're not as fluent with some of those facts.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden they'll start to fall apart like on a very long problem. But
Yeah. Yes.
Well, and it's at that point, it's the what are we assessing? Sometimes that question I feel like it comes up. Are we assessing their understanding of volume? And do they know what that is and how to find the volume or decompose the shape into different parts and then find the volume, or are we assessing multiplication? I mean, or both. Like sometimes both.
All of it, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big conversation to have too. I mean, and if you're talking about formative assessment or you're talking about an actual end of unit assessment, like those two conversations might sound different, but that's what we were talking about today. And teachers were disagreeing. I was like, did they do the process right? They're like, no. I'm like, did they do the process right? And ultimately the answer was yes, they did, but they were making mistakes within. And so I think teachers don't necessarily agree on what's being assessed all the time, which is interesting. There needs to be more conversation like what you're talking about with your teachers, where you're talking about, even in your blog saying, this is what we did after school today. After the kids left, we looked at this student work, and I think there's so much opportunity if you can do that, but also not a whole lot of time to do it.
No, and I was looking for one of my old blog posts because, oh, look at that. I had called it What Will Help Plan for Tomorrow. So clever. I was like, why can't I find it? And it was 3rd grade. And I remember meeting with this teacher. I wonder if I can okay, so bear with me for just a second. I'm trying to be way more clever than I should be in the middle of a live stream. As one does. But here's what I think I can do. I can make a PDF. It didn't make a pretty PDF, and that is what it is. And then it will let me upload the file. What did I call this?
You are much better than I.
There we go. Oh, as a guest, I can only upload 2. Are you kidding?
No, but I tried to get rid of.
There, I got rid of 1.
Oh, you did. Okay, very good. Because if I do it, then I kick you out.
Don't kick me out.
I know. That's why I didn't do it.
All right, what?
But don't get me wrong. I did kick someone out one time, totally by accident, and it was not nice, but it was totally by accident.
It's not going to let me, but that's okay. Okay, so I will have to orally describe this.
Okay.
Instead. Because the process of me sharing it with you. Oh wait, it says share screen. Am I allowed to just share my screen?
Right.
Why was I doing that whole time? That was absurd. Oh, learning so much. All right, so this works better than that ridiculous PDF thing. When did I even write this? This feels like ages ago. All right.
22 it was, yeah.
It feels like a lifetime ago. Okay, so we were looking at trains, and it's all about multiplication, and you're making these cube patterns with these trains, and it's like, all right, so when will the 5th green one happen? Or to be able to oh, well, 3 times 5 is 15. And here's a 4 train. You start to look at multiples. It's all multiples. And assessments capture a moment in time. For example, that kid who had done the very complicated and incorrect, ultimately,
Mhm.
compensation strategy. Like, that's what he thought of on Tuesday. I don't know what he would have thought of on Wednesday. And
Right.
just because the student didn't use the US standard algorithm on that doesn't mean they don't know it. Like, you have to just be like, take it for what it is.
Mhm.
So we were watching, and what did we give the kids? What problem is this? Okay, so there's a Fortran with 32 cubes. How many times does the RYGBG pattern repeat?
Mm.
And you know multiples, so
Mhm.
probably have an idea. But kids in third grade did not necessarily know it, so we
Yeah.
had some different strategies. She was drawing them, and not drawing them like a train. She was drawing them in layers
Mm.
to show the
She
repeated.
wanted to be able to see how many, right?
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
like it.
And here he
Oh,
made
I
it
see.
more like that, but he was like in a 4 and a 4 and a 4 and a 4. So it's just a linear version of that.
Mhm.
Here was her diagram of like one, two, like red, yellow, green, green, blue, red, yellow, green, blue, red, yellow, green, blue, red, yellow. Like, it kind of felt like eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and like just
Yeah.
tossing them out. But using like a partitive division strategy. And then I scanned it all in. You can ask the teachers. I really am compulsive about scanning in tons of student work. Like, whenever they hand me something, I'm like, hold on, I'm just gonna go scan it, and they're like, we know. Um, or I take lots and lots of screenshots, and I'll like photograph everything, and the kids like to estimate how many pictures I have in my phone now. Because they'll be like, how do you have that many more? Like, last time we did this, it was like 1,000 less. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I document. I'm a historian. That's fine.
Yeah.
Um, And so we did these, and we like basically made these boxes, like these buckets of like, here's what they did. And it was too many buckets.
Mhm.
It was like, oh, look
Wow.
at these kids doing partitive division. Look at the kids doing quotative division. Look at the kids who were skip counting. Look at the kids who were doing a missing factor. Like, it felt so cool. It, like, from a PD sense, it was like, look at, and it was this teacher. That's not actually her name, Caitlin, because I give everyone fake names. I'm going to blow up her spot. Her name's Christine, and she's so smart. So Christine has all this experience, and she has this like understand like this great pedagogical content knowledge about how kids will approach the problem,
Mhm.
and that's really great to have that knowledge, but then you also have to figure out what to do with that knowledge in the
Yeah,
moment.
yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so here are more kids. Felix drawing that,
Wow.
Hmm.
and then it was like, okay, well, what are we going to do with this?
Yeah.
um And ultimately, I remember sitting with her and being like, all right, well, the big thing is that everyone showed equal groups. And
Mm.
there's some kids that we really want to think more multiplicatively than they did. Like, some kids were kind of like counting it still. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they showed equal groups, but they had to count by ones to get there.
Mhm.
So we had to figure out how to move past that. I have not reread this blog post since 2022. So fun surprises for me.
Well, and I wonder, like, when, so some people I'm sure will be like, well, when am I doing that? And
Right? Because it takes so long.
and how do I know? And like, what if I don't have that like pedagogical knowledge or someone to sit with me who does have the pedagogical knowledge
Mhm.
to think about these like next steps for students? Um,
It's kind of, I feel like it requires, this was a blog post that never got finished. It had a really cute picture of my daughter that will never see the light of day. That was like about apertures, where it was like you have to zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, and think about your lens. And here we zoomed in maybe a little too close. And then we had
Hmm.
to zoom back out and be like, okay, well, what do they all have in common? Or like, what's a big theme that we're seeing? And the big thing we were seeing is that they were showing equal groups, but they weren't necessarily writing equations. And
mhm,
so it looks like we launched by showing this girl Ellie's work, and then it doesn't look like a train. Is that okay? What multiplication equation are we going to show?
mhm,
And another
Hmm.
kid, Felix was up. Where was Felix? Oh, if Felix had written 4 times something is 32.
mhm,
And like, how does that connect to Ellie's work? Um, and so the biggest thing was that we wanted to link things more to equations and really stress the multiplication, because and some of this was like my own thing where like I love when teachers get really excited about student work,
Mhm.
but also you have to be restless and want to push them to the next thing. So it's not enough to just be like, wow, cool, we did this so many different ways and that was so accessible, A plus for us.
Yeah.
To be like, that's so great that everyone had a strategy, and we really want to push them towards more multiplicative, explicitly multiplicative work. We want to get those equations out. We want them to not count by ones as much anymore since we're in third grade.
Mhm.
Um, and so that is what we did. And then what did we need to know? It was helpful to see it, but also this was a longer process. I remember
Mhm.
trying to make a spreadsheet with her, and she was like, this has too many colors. I'm like, Christine, you're right. Sorry.
Uh,
Oh
And
God.
it's true. We don't have time to do that all the time. Like we
mhm.
can't do this for every lesson.
Right.
However, I'm trying to help teachers get in the habit of like what I like to do, not just like, oh, because I'm so great. But what I like when I taught sixth grade a few years ago, I was giving like a quick exit ticket every single
Mhm.
day. And I was looking for patterns. And sometimes you don't use every little thing you learn. Like you don't go deep into it. You just be like, oh, like I don't really know how Elijah got that. That's interesting.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't have time to figure this out right now. And like maybe Elijah didn't even put that much thought into it. Maybe he's like throwing things down.
Mhm.
But that it's the more you do it, the faster it is to recognize patterns in student thought anyway. And that yeah, it's like I just like using it every single day because I want it grounded in the kids. And I think the kids like to have it reflecting them as well. So like they really like when I show their work. Even the other day, they really liked. I'm gonna stop sharing that one. Um, I was teaching a lesson, and I had a slide deck from when I taught the lesson before. Um, the teacher asked me to teach it like an hour before. I was not planning to go in. She had to leave. She had a sick kid, and she's like, "Is there any way you could come in and teach math today?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." And she's like, "We're on this lesson." And I'm like, "I don't have time to plan this, to be honest. I have to teach for the next hour." Like, oh, okay. But I found that I had a slide deck from that lesson that I had used like 3 years ago. And I'm like, okay, great. I'll use this. That never happens to me because I work with 9 grade levels.
Yeah.
I don't teach the same lesson twice. So I went in and was like,
Give your
it's so great. I have my slide deck. And the kids were like, the teacher taught this lesson yesterday. And I looked at the text message and I'm like, yeah, that is what that says. It says that she just taught that lesson. I'm supposed to do the next one. Um, oops. And I don't have a slide deck for that. But what I did have on that slide deck, which was so interesting, was I had student work from like when I'd made the slide deck. I had like
Mhm.
put it in live as I was doing it. Like we were doing the lesson. I took pictures of the student work and I had inserted it into the slides so that we could talk about it because I'm compulsive and like to do that sort of thing. Um, I wonder if I
amazing.
even find it for you really fast. That would be funny. 3, 4, 1. Hold on. 411. Is that what it was? It's the ant one. No, I can't find it. Anyway, I was like showing them, I'm like, okay, well, let's just like talk about what you did yesterday. I don't have any of your work, but I have Annika's work. And they were like, Annika from sixth grade. I'm like, yeah, Annika from sixth grade. I have her work. And Anand's work. And like, do you want to look at that? And we looked and they were so excited to see kids that were like the big kids in the school.
Right.
And they were like so fascinated by it. It wasn't even their work.
Mhm.
But it felt more authentic to them for some reason. They were like, so like we're gonna if we see her in the hallway, we're gonna tell her we got to see. She's not gonna remember this work. There's no way she's gonna remember this. But like I think that is important to like have it reflective of student thinking and to bring in their knowledge as much as you can. And the way to bring in their knowledge as much as you can is to sit and listen to them and to collect their work. And
Hmm.
like today we were talking and I'm like, oh, well, like this is like Elvira's partial sum strategy. Or like, oh, remember how Motoko likes to like annotate it this way?
Yeah.
And like that, I don't know, it makes it stickier for them.
Mhm.
Like I don't even
Yeah.
think it's necessarily just a culture thing. It's just like they just pay attention more.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were actually talking about that today. I don't know if you ever have used the video, my favorite no
Oh
from the
yeah.
teaching channel.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's very much what you're talking about, using student work to analyze mistakes and misconceptions. And one of the teachers today said, she says, when I do this, kids are all in, even if they don't know whose work it is, because
Mhm.
they try to protect. And they said they're all in. They
Mhm.
they want to do it. And I really
Mhm.
think that that's a powerful way to do formative assessment, and you're doing formative assessment at the same time as you're actually dealing with whatever the issue is, or at least one of the issues that there
Mhm.
may be right in the moment, which is awesome.
No, and I
Yeah.
think the more you do it, like the more comfortable you get with it. And when I do this
Yeah.
with teachers, they start to do it more themselves too. And there's some it's not I'm not so amazing, I swear. But that it's nice to walk in and be like, oh, like look, that teacher is just like using the student work so much more because they had that rehearsal with me and they practiced and like they
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like it's not just
Mhm.
the work that they're using, like the kid thinking. Because I think that's why I went into teaching, is because I just get so fascinated by how people conceive of things.
Mhm.
Right, right. I love it. I love it.
We always have so much that we get to talk with you about, and I'm sure everyone else will want to hear more. We did not talk about slow reveal graphs, but
I know.
which is okay.
I know. We could have talked about
Clearly,
that
I'd
for
like to hear myself talk a lot. So,
but but if you are not familiar, that is one of the spaces where you can find out more about Jenna's work that she began years ago, and her idea has really spawned so many other ideas. And this is a space um, where you can use data and statistics in
Mm.
ways that are really accessible to students, and are about things that they might care about
Yeah,
versus the stuff that shows up in the textbook. So,
yeah. If you've
real
not heard of
data.
slow, yeah, if you've not heard of slow reveal graphs, it's really so conceptual and very engaging for students. So I recommend. But what are some other places where our listeners can find you, Jenna?
So I do still blog a lot. I have so many drafts that I need to finish. But that is at jennalaib.com. That's my name. And it is pronounced Laib. You guys nailed it at the beginning.
Thank you.
try.
Thank you.
I have longtime friends and colleagues who say things that are not close, so I appreciate that.
All right,
Yeah,
I
that's my
totally get
website.
that.
It's mostly a blog because I like using writing to reflect on what I'm doing. It makes it stickier for me. Like I was able to go through and be like, oh, I think I wrote about this with the third graders.
Yeah,
Um,
and also I have recently been on there. So if you're ever looking for student work, she includes a lot of it. So you could then use
you're
that
welcome to
student
use
work
it.
in your own class.
Anonymized. All of
Yeah,
the kids are given pseudonyms and they're slightly changed to like remove identifying features, so you can use whatever you want from the student work.
Awesome.
and then you are still on Twitter
I am still
or,
on Twitter.
or X, whatever.
Yeah, I don't do it quite as much, but I do check it, I think, still every day.
Mhm.
I would love for the community to come back wherever. So
Yeah.
I'm using Blue Sky a little bit more.
I'm trying to get used to Blue Sky. I kind of quit
Yeah.
Twitter and then stopped paying
And
attention altogether. So getting back
I
into it.
support people quitting Twitter. I have trouble with transitions. So
mhm. I feel like I can just let it be and not be there, and transition to new things on Blue Sky.
it would be
And
great to have a good Blue Sky community going.
yeah,
And
I
Yeah.
feel like it's
Great.
it's
nice vibe.
starting to be that, but
Mhm.
you know,
Hmm.
it's hard to find and make sure that it's a safe space. That's the
Mhm.
biggest thing.
Mhm.
Right. Right. Well, Jenna, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I love talking about student work, and I love looking at your own students' work. So for anybody out there who wants to look at student work, check out her blog. There will be no lack of it there.
Thank you.
Ugh.
Well, thank you so much.
All right. Bye. Ugh, all the stuff that we do,
I
right?
know.
And she does it like every day. It's fun. It's very fun.
The interview information, like
Oh,
student interviews as well, are really amazing. So I would check that out also.
yeah, for sure.
Using those.
For sure.
Our next show is on the 30th.
Coming
And
right up.
yeah, coming right up. We hope that you will join us then. And until that point, oh yes.
No, take a look at our book. And until then, keep math creative, curious, and inclusive.